Hi and welcome to our next YouTube tutorial. In this video we're going to be building a countdown application with HTML, CSS and JavaScript from scratch. The project is going to be created based on those technologies, so I expect that you already know some basic stuff about them. So before we start to build the project, I'm going to go through it and describe. So as you can see, we have a full screen dark background. In the center of the page we have a couple of elements. I'm in the heading, which says that something is coming soon. Next it's followed by the countdown, which works automatically. It updates after every second. We have here 4 different sections. I'm in the sections for days, hours, minutes and seconds. Then down below we have a reset button. If I click it, then the countdown will reset and all values here will become 0. Alright, so that's it, what we're going to build. The project is going to be a kind of simple one, but hopefully you will have some fun. So I have created a new folder on desktop called Countdown, which right now is empty. Let's go ahead and open it in VS Code and set up our working files. So overall we will have 3 different files for HTML, CSS and JavaScript. Let's go ahead and create them. Let's call the HTML file index.html. Then we will have style.css and script.js. Okay, after that I'm going to go to the index.html file and create the basic HTML document. For that I'm going to use Emmet. Let's place here an exclamation mark and hit enter or tab. So here we go. I'm going to change the title. Let's insert here countdown. After that let's link CSS and JavaScript files to the HTML. Let's open link tag and specify here the path of the CSS file. As for the JavaScript, I'm going to open script tag right above the closing body tag and then specify the path of the JavaScript file in the source attribute. Alright, so all 3 files are connected and now I'm going to run the project to the browser. For that let's use one of the VS Code packages called a live server, which allows us to run the project live to the browser and make the changes and updates without refreshing the page each time. So I recommend you to use this package. Alright, so the project is up and running. Finally, I'm going to place the editor and the browser side by side, like so, and get started. First of all, let's create the HTML markup, which is going to be the simple one. I'm going to open div tag, which is going to be the container. Then it should be followed by the countdown wrapper. It will include all 3 elements, I mean heading elements, with the text coming soon. After that we will have an empty div with the class countdown, in which we will insert the content from JavaScript. And finally we will have button with the class reset and with the text reset. Alright, so here we have the heading and the button. Right now the countdown div element is not shown here because it's empty. So now I'm going to move on and start to write JavaScript. We will create the countdown and make it work, and then I will take care of the design. Let's go to the script.js file and first of all let's select the countdown div and store it in the variable. Let's create variable called countdown and select div element using query selector method. Okay, so in order to create the countdown we have to manipulate the JavaScript date objects. By default, JavaScript uses the browser's time zone and displays a date as a text string. Let's go ahead and create the date object and check what it looks like. I'm going to create the variable. Let's call it date. So in order to create the date object, we have to use the new date constructor function. Let's run the date to the console. So if I inspect the page and check the console tab, then you will find here the current date and time followed by the time zone. Alright, so in general the date object has a couple of different methods which allow us to get the current day, month, hour, and so on. I'm not going to go through them. We will use just the new date constructor function. So besides getting the current date, you can specify the future or past date manually. For example, we can pass here the year, let's say 2020, then a month, but you need to remember that you have to specify a month by using index numbers. Months have 0 base index numbers, so if I want to pass here, let's say August, which is the 8th month of the year, then I have to insert here 7. Next comes the day of the month. Let's pass here 15. And then you can specify the time, I mean hours, minutes, and seconds. Let's pass here 12 and zeros as the minutes and the seconds. Alright, so if we check the console, then we'll get the date that we have just specified here. Alright, so suppose that this date is the deadline and we have to count down from that date. Actually, I want to note that if you watch this video in the future and this date is already past, then you need to enter the date from the future. Okay, I'm going to change the name of the variable. Let's make it deadline and also get rid of the console.log. Besides that, we have to define the current time. So let's create new variable. I'm going to call it current and then assign to it new date constructor. Alright, so the time that should display on the page is going to be the difference between the deadline and the current time. So let's at first check the difference in the console. I'm going to create a variable, let's call it div, the difference. It should be equal to deadline minus current, and then run the variable to the console. So as you can see, we have here some strange and a huge number. Actually, this is the amount of time, the difference between the deadline and the current time shown in milliseconds. We're going to use this amount of milliseconds to define separately the remaining days, hours, minutes, and seconds. So let's go ahead and create the variable and call it days. So in order to get the number of the remaining days, we have to divide the amount of difference by the number of milliseconds which we have in 24 hours. So we need difference divided by, then open parenthesis, and we have to multiply 1000 milliseconds to 60 seconds. Then we need 60 minutes and finally 24 hours. Then I'm going to run this variable to the console. So as you can see, we got here the number of the days, but with some decimals. We don't need those decimals because we just need to display the number of days. So we have to round the number down, and for that we can use one of the JavaScript methods called math.floor. So now, as you can see, we have here just the number of the days without decimals. Okay, so next we need to define the hours, minutes, and seconds in the same way. Let's move on to the hours. I'm going to use again math.floor method. So in case of hours, we have to divide the difference by the product of the milliseconds, seconds, and minutes, and then we have to grab the remaining amount from that operation. So we have to use one of the arithmetic operators called modulus, or sometimes it's called the remainder. So the modulus operator returns the division remainder, and it is expressed by the percentage sign. So we need here difference divided by the product of 1000 milliseconds, 60 seconds, and 60 minutes. Then we have to use modulus followed by the 24, which is the number of hours. So again, this operation will give us the remaining hours. In other words, after this operation, the number of hours always will be less than 24. If I check hours to the console, then we will get the number of remaining hours. Alright, let's move on to the minutes. Create new variable, call it minutes, then use again math.floor method. So in case of minutes, we have to divide the difference by the product of the milliseconds and the seconds, and then we need modulus 60, which is the number of minutes. So we need difference divided by the product of 1000 milliseconds and seconds, modulus 60. Okay, let's go ahead and define the seconds in the same way. Create new variable, use then math.floor. So in case of seconds, we need to divide difference by 1000 milliseconds, and then we need modulus 60, which is the seconds. So if I check the seconds in the console and then start to refresh the page, you will see here how the number of seconds is updating. Alright, all four amounts are defined, and now we need to display them on the page. To be more precise, in the countdown div, which we have created in the HTML file and then selected it here. So I'm going to pass a couple of div elements inside the countdown div and then attach to each div element the proper variable from those four variables. So we need to change the content of the countdown div, and for that I'm going to use one of the DOM properties called inner HTML. It allows us to set the HTML content of an element. So let's attach to countdown the inner HTML property, then open backticks because we need to interpolate the variables to the HTML tags. So we need here 4 div elements. Then in the first one I'm going to pass days. We need $, curly braces, and the variable name days. Then we will have hours, minutes, and then seconds. Alright, so as you can see, we have here all 4 values: days, hours, minutes, and seconds. Right now they are in a static mode, they are not updating automatically. If I reload the page, then the number of seconds will be updated. So we have to make the countdown dynamic. It should update automatically in every second. In order to do that, we have to use one of the JavaScript methods called setInterval. The setInterval method executes the function at specified intervals in milliseconds. Alright, let's create a variable and call it interval, and then assign to it a setInterval method. So this method takes 2 arguments. The first one is going to be the callback function, which will be executed with some intervals. So now we have to pass here inside the function this entire code. Let's grab it and paste it inside the function. The second argument is going to be the amount of time. We need to execute the function after each second. So I'm going to pass here 1000 milliseconds. So as you can see, the countdown is working and it's updating after each second. Alright, so we have managed to create the main part of the project. We have to customize the functionality a little bit, but in order to make the working process more interesting, let's take care of the design. Once we style the project, then we will add a couple of things to the countdown from JavaScript. Okay, let's open style.css file and first of all create some reset and common styles. I'm going to select every element using an asterisk, and then let's get rid of default margin and padding. I'm going to set both of them to 0 and also use box sizing border box. Besides that, I want to change the font family for all the elements. I'm going to use one of the Google fonts. So let's go to the Google Fonts website and search for font called Bellew DA2. Let's select those styles. Then grab the link and paste it in the head element. After that, I'm going to set font family for every element to Bellew DA2 cursive. Alright, so as you can see, these styles are applied. Actually, I'm going to use rem as the measurement unit throughout this project. We do that in almost every tutorial because I think it's very convenient and easy to use. Right now, 1 rem equals 16 pixels because the font size of HTML is equal to 16 pixels by default. I want to convert 1 rem into 10 pixels, and for that we have to decrease the font size of the HTML element. Let's set it to 62.5%. Okay, so as you can see, the sizes of the elements have decreased, and now 1 rem equals 10 pixels. Let's move on and take care of the container. I'm going to expand it to the entire page. So let's select it and define width and height. I'm going to set width to 100%. As for the height, let's make it 100% of the viewport. And finally, let's change background color. I'm going to use here color 17181B. Okay, next let's select the countdown wrapper. I'm going to place it in the center of the page. I mean to center it vertically. So first of all, let's define width, make it 100%. Then I'm going to set its position to absolute. After that, I'm going to assign to the container position relative because I want to position the countdown wrapper according to the container. Then define the top property. Let's set it to 15%. Then place text in the center using text align center. And change the color. Make it DDD. Alright, so the position of the countdown wrapper is changed, and now I'm going to customize the individual elements. Let's start with the heading. First of all, I'm going to increase font size. Let's make it 8 rem. Then change font weight. Make it lighter. Assign to it 400. Next, I'm going to transform text into uppercase. Then create some space at the bottom using margin bottom 8 rem. And finally, I'm going to use text shadow in order to create some shadow effect. Let's pass here 0.5 rem, 0.8 rem, and the RGBA value with black color and with opacity 0.5. Alright, so the heading looks good. Let's move on and take care of the countdown. I'm going to place those numbers horizontally in a row using Flexbox. And also place them in the center using Justify Content Center. Okay, that's it about the countdown. Now I'm going to customize the div elements which we have created in JavaScript. I'm in the child div element of the countdown. So first of all, let's define width and height. I'm going to set both of them to 13 rems. Next, I'm going to define the background. Actually, I want to use a linear gradient because with the linear gradient we will be able to divide the background into 2 different parts. So first of all, I'm going to change the direction. Let's make it to bottom. It means that the transition will go from top to bottom. Then use RGBA value Let's pass here 61, 58, 58, and the opacity 0.9. And also we need here 50%. Next, we need another RGBA value with the numbers 99, 93, 93, and the opacity 0.9. And we have to place here 0. So as you see, now the background is divided into two different parts. Okay, after that I'm going to create some space using margin. Let's set it to 0 at the top, then 4 rem on the right side, 12 rem at the bottom, and 4 rem on the left side. After that, let's increase the font size, make it 7 rem, and also change the font weight, make it 400. Okay, next I'm going to center the numbers inside the boxes, and for that let's use flexbox. We need display flex, justify content center, and align item center. And finally I'm going to create some shadow effect. Let's use box shadow with the values 0, 0.8 rem, 2.5 rem, and then the RGBA value with the black color and with opacity 0.5. Alright, so step by step the project is getting pretty nicer. The next thing that I want to do is to display a little line in the center of each box or card, whatever it is. I'm going to create the line using before pseudo element. So let's select countdown div, followed by the before pseudo element. First of all, let's define content, make it empty. Then set position to absolute. I'm going to position the element according to its parent element, so let's assign to the countdown div position relative. Next, let's define width and height. I'm going to set width to 100%. As for the height, let's make it 0.24 rem. And also define background color, make it 17181B. Okay, so as you can see, we have here the line in the center of the boxes. Let's go ahead and move on to the next thing. Let's take a look at the finished project. As you can see, underneath of each box we can see the proper text, I mean days, hours, minutes, and seconds. I'm going to add them using after pseudo class. So we can either select each div element with the nth child selector separately and define the content, but I'm not going to do that. I will use a little trick. Let's go to the script.js file and assign to each div element the attribute called data content. Then as the values, let's insert here days, hours, then we have minutes and seconds. Then go back to the CSS file and select countdown div with the after pseudo element. Let's define content. So as the value of the content property, I'm going to pass here the function called attribute, which is expressed as attr, and we have to pass here the data content attribute. So as you can see, the text values appeared on the page. Right now they are too bigger, so let's take care of that. Let's change font size, make it 2.2 rem. Then set font weight to 400. Then set position to absolute and define bottom property, make it -6 rem. Alright, so the last element that I want to customize is a button. So let's select it. First of all, let's define width and height. I'm going to set width to 22 rem. As for the height, let's make it 6 rem. Then get rid of default border using border none. And change the background color. I'm going to use here color A52, A2A. Next, let's take care of the font. I'm going to set font size to 2.2 rem. Then make font weight 400. Create some space between the letters. Make it 0.2 rem. Also transform text into uppercase. Then change the color of the text. Make it light using color EEE. After that, I'm going to create some shadow for the text and for the button itself. So let's use text shadow with the values 0, 0.3 rem, 0.5 rem, and the RGBA value with the black color and with the opacity 0.5. Let's duplicate this line of code, change text into box. Also, instead of 0.5 rem, I'm going to use 0.6 rem. And finally, let's get rid of default outline, make it none. Alright, so that's it about the design. The project looks pretty nice, and now I'm going to go back to the script.js file and add a couple of more things to the functionality of the countdown. So once the number on the countdown becomes less than 10, then only one digit will be displayed. That's not quite nice, so I'm going to manage to display always 2 digits no matter what. So I'm going to use the conditional statement. We have to check if the length of days is equal to 1. If this is true, then we have to display days with 0. And if it is false, then we have to display just days. Actually, I have used here the property length within number, but it's not correct. The length property will work fine with the string values, so we have to convert those numbers into string values. There are a couple of ways to do that. I'm going to add to each number an empty string. So in this case, values will be concatenated and we will get the string values. Alright, let's use this conditional for the rest of the numbers. I'm going to copy it and paste it. We need here hours. Then we need minutes. And finally, we need seconds. Alright, so now the problem is fixed. We will no longer have 1-digit numbers on the countdown. The next thing that I want to do is that once the time is expired, we have to change the content of the countdown from those numbers into some text. So we need if statement. As a condition, we have to check if the difference is less than the 0. So if it is true, then it means that the time is expired and we have to change the content of the countdown. First of all, we need to clear the interval. I mean to stop the setInterval function. For that, we have to use one of the methods called clearInterval. And we have to pass here the variable interval. After that, I'm going to change the content of the countdown. So we need countdown.innerHTML. Let's use here h1 heading element with some text. Let's say, here we go. Okay, so in order to check how it works, I'm going to set the date to the current time. So here we go, it works fine. Alright, so we're almost done. The only thing that I'm going to do is to make the reset button work. Once I click it, it should reset the countdown and make those numbers zeros. So I'm going to select reset button using query selector method. Then I'm going to attach to it event listener using add event listener method. It takes two arguments. The first one is going to be the click event. As for the second one, I'm going to pass here an arrow function, which will be executed once we click the reset button. So first of all, we have to stop set interval function. I mean, we have to use clear interval method. Let's pass here interval. So now I'm going to select all div elements. Then we need to loop through them and change the content. We need to make it zeros. So I'm going to create the variable, let's call it divs. Then select all div elements inside of the countdown. So we need query selector all method, and we have to specify here class countdown followed by the div. So as we said, we have to loop through those div elements and change their content. So I'm going to use one of the array helper methods called for each. So for each method takes one argument. It's going to be the callback function, which will take one parameter, and it's going to be the current item in the list. Let's call it div. So we need to change the content of each div. Let's use inner HTML and set content to zeros. Okay, so if I click the button, then it will reset the countdown. Okay, so that's it about the project. Finally, we're done. I hope you enjoyed it and learned some new stuff. If you like this video, then please thumbs up, comment below, share the video, subscribe to our channel, and most importantly, click the bell to get notified on coming videos. Okay, see you next time.